This Choircast podcast is brought to you by Heretic 2 by Matthew J. DiStefano. Ready to challenge everything you thought you knew about faith? In Heretic 2, I dive into LGBTQ affirmation, rejecting divine violence, and embracing universalism in a bold post-Christian perspective. If you're done with outdated dogma and want a justice-oriented, inclusive view of spirituality, then this book is for you. Get Heretic 2 wherever books are sold, and start rethinking faith today.
Hey, heathens, you're listening to the Deadly Faith Podcast, where religion and crime collide. I'm Laci.
And I'm Lola.
And this shit is complete hysteria.
Cross my heart, oh to die. Welcome to the dark side. Oh to die, oh to die.
Okay. Yeah, I already knew that.
I know. It's kind of given, Salem Witch Trials.
You see the title?
It's hysteria.
Everyone has some knowledge of this. I'm going to make a blanket statement for once.
If you don't, you were homeschooled and lived in a cellar.
Oh.
Like that.
No, we've talked about people that actually
I know. That's actually popped in my head. I was like, that's the only way that you would not know.
Do you kiss Santa with that mouth?
Yeah. But I will say, there was a lot of the Salem Witch Trial, like the nitty-gritty details, I did not know. I had never, watched a documentary on it or, what started it, all that stuff.
Well, learn me something.
Hey, heathens. So before we dive into today's case, I am thrilled to share with you that my book is about to be released. I can't believe it's finally here. It's been a long journey filled with tears, sweat, and laughter, and I just couldn't be more excited. So the book is called Leaving the Sanctuary. It is discovering life beyond the boundaries of religion. It's, chronicling my journey of religious deconstruction, and it touches on literally everything from depression to fear to the shifts in my closest relationships, because if you know, you know. It offers just a really raw perspective on that season of my life, along with some insights that I hope will really resonate with you and maybe give you a little nugget of wisdom or a tip or a trick for you to help with your journey. So mark your calendars for November 12th, 2024, when it will be available exclusively on Amazon. Thank you guys so much for all of your support, and back to the case. In the early, trigger warnings. Sorry, rewind.
Yeah.
Hangings, hysteria, and torture. The torture is not graphic. There's just little bits of torture.
Little bits of torture. It's mild torture.
It's torture light.
No.
Okay, so in the early 1600s, English settlers arrived from England seeking religious freedom from the Church of England and aiming to establish a separation between church and state. Remember that. That's their goal. Okay, now let's see if they stick to that.
Okay.
Spoiler alert, they do not, but I think we can see that coming. So their transition was far from smooth as they came to America. They faced numerous conflicts with Native Americans over land, colonization, resulting in significant casualties and devastated communities on both sides. Additionally, the harsh winters in the northeastern United States presented another serious challenge for them. The combination of these difficulties made life for the English Puritans extremely tough for many, many years.
Can I just say I hate the word Puritans?
I do too. I had to look it up because I was like, what exactly does that mean? And it's just basically
Can you tell me exactly what it means?
Like a Christian.
Is it someone that's not Catholic?
No.
Because that's Protestant.
This is just trying to establish their own version of Christianity in a very Puritan, as in very pure.
The pure version of the gospel, they're going straight from the text kind of thing.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that's at least how I interpreted it.
Sure.
I could be wrong. I'm not a scholar. Anyways, by 1689, Samuel Parris had become the pastor of the village's congregational church. He was educated in theology at Harvard College, which is now Harvard University. And Parris was a married man with 3 children, and he owned 2 slaves. A man named John Indian. I don't know if that's his last name, but that's what it was stated as. And a woman named Tituba. Now, Tituba, I don't know her last name, but both slaves were believed to be of African American or Caribbean Native American descent. There's not concrete evidence to prove which way that is, but it's at least probably
80s,
one of them. Yeah.
The 1680s.
It was the 80s. Whole new definition of the 80s. After Samuel Parris became the pastor, the congregation began to fracture. So early in his tenure, Parris sought ownership of the church's parsonage. So if you don't know what a parsonage is, it's basically like a home that the church owns that the pastor lives in. Even to this day, they'll still call them parsonages. And I don't know why I don't like that word, but I just don't like it.
So gross.
It just sounds weird.
Free housing for someone to tell you about a prophecy or talk to you about the King James Version.
Right. And like, you know, I have no qualms with like giving them free housing. Can we pick a different word besides parsonage?
Well,
because I just really feel like I'm trying to say a partridge and a pear tree. That's
okay.
Like,
well, that's valid.
Yeah, I just don't like it.
Yeah, no, I think about that too.
Yeah.
Also, I know that it's King James and not King Rames. I'm quoting Bob's Burgers.
You're like, I was that Christian. Okay, I do know.
Personally, I think if you make money, if you make a career out of being a preacher or a pastor, I think that that's corrupt. Like in the most ungodly way. I think that's the truth of it.
I can agree with you on certain aspects. So if it's like a mega church and you're buying $1,200 sneakers to go on stage and give your sermon, that's one thing. But if your church is like actively in the community and helping, and it is I feel like in a legit congregation, a legit church, the pastors are not making bukus of money. Like it is a very much like in a legit church,
thing. You don't have a pastor. You don't have a leader. Your leader is God. Your leader is Jesus. That's why I'm like,
that.
You get a salary. Jesus didn't get a fucking salary. Like nobody else got paid for this shit. They died for this shit. So like, if you're gonna go all the way, you should just like do it out of the goodness of your heart and do something else. Because like the rest of the church is the ones giving you money.
Yeah.
And they're supposed to be doing the work, not just whoever the leader is. That's just my personal thing. Whatever.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from, but I hold a different view.
Totally fine
on that. Yeah, exactly.
There are probably pastors listening to this that are like, I also hold a different view.
They're like, fuck Lola, fuck Laci. Okay, just kidding. Anyways, we're allowed to have different views. All right, guys. It's all right. Okay. So it's fracturing. He wants the parsonage and he wants ownership of it. So he's like, give me the parsonage, put it under my name. And this deeply unsettled many members and fueled a growing division amongst the congregation, which like valid. He just like waltzes in and is like, give me your building. What the fuck, dude? Who do you think you are? That's what I think.
Every other pastor? No.
I know, right?
That's not true. Not all pastors think that way. But I think I would be pissed off if I was part of this congregation. I'd be like,
oh, I would.
Who are you? Who raised you?
Yeah. Like you come in here
Santa with that mouth? I've got to stop saying that.
He thinks his shit now stink. And it's like, excuse me, sir. No. So additionally, Parris also required that non-members of the church leave before communion was taken. And this practice was not well received by many of the congregation members. They thought it was just ungodly to like kick people out who weren't official members in order to just take communion.
Did he justify that?
I think probably like biblical reasonings and like, if he did, there's no record of like what he used to justify it.
Gotcha.
So it wasn't long before Salem in itself was split into pro and anti-Parris factions. So the town is becoming divided.
It's like Trump country, but kind of country.
Yeah.
Everyone's divided.
Yes. Yeah. So on January 16th, 1692, Parris's 9-year-old daughter, Betty, his 11-year-old niece, Abigail Williams, and a 12-year-old named Ann Putnam began exhibiting very strange behaviors. They had fits, made odd noises. They started throwing objects. They contorted their bodies and complained of sensations like bites or pinches that were just happening to their bodies out of nowhere. It wasn't somebody or something doing it to them. They also reported feeling as if they were being choked, and one of them even ran into a fire and had to be drug out before she died. So it was very alarming behavior. Yeah. Freaking crazy.
Sorry, and these are all like teenager-ish?
They're
like
not even teenagers. So we've got an 11-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 12-year-old. So we haven't even hit the teens. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So doctors...
I'm imagining your oldest doing this. That is...
Yeah. It's crazy. Now, doctors were unable to find a medical explanation, so the doctor themselves suggested that it was symptoms of some kind of supernatural occurrence. And I'm like, okay. Can you just imagine going to the doctor and they're like, we don't know. Have you tried, exorcism?
Well, it's the 80s.
It's the 80s. So in response, a neighbor advised Tituba, the slave, to to make a witch cake, which was baked, I'm not even kidding, using the victim's urine to supposedly reveal the supernatural source of their afflictions. What?
I have heard of this before.
I have not. And this was wild to me.
Yeah.
Well,
super gross.
Tituba actually made this witch cake. And when Paris found out, he was pissed. He was like, this is an act of blasphemy. How could you? And it was all, hell was unleashed. He was so angry. And I can't understand why Tituba or anybody else in the household, for that fact, was like, I think this is a good idea. I'm going to go and actually try to make this witch cake. How would they not see this as something that he was going to see as witchcraft? Because he's the type of preacher, which we'll talk about in a second, he's like fire and brimstone.
Okay.
He was not going to accept this. And he didn't.
Yeah.
So desperate to figure out what was going on, Paris pressured the girls repeatedly until they accused Tituba and 2 other marginalized members of the community. Sarah Good, who was a beggar, and Sarah Osborne, an elderly bedridden woman who was rumored to be romantically involved with an indentured servant. So on March...
what servant? I'm sorry.
Indentured servant.
Does that mean someone that's ran away but come back?
Mm-mm.
Or ran away and taken in by somebody else? Or is it a permanent? Maybe it's a permanent.
I think it's the permanent
slave. Because I know sometimes they'll ask their master to pierce their ear and keep them if they like their master, or if the master just likes them, they'll pierce their ear.
Yeah. So it says that an indentured servant is a person who agrees to work for a specific period of time without pay in exchange for food, shelter, and transportation. So basically still a servant, but there's some kind of time frame on your, I'm going to call it captivity. So could be something that you voluntarily sign up for, or it could be something that is like a punishment.
Gotcha.
Is how I'm understanding it. So she was rumored to have some kind of sexual relationship or romantic relationship with an indentured servant, which I'm assuming this was a person of color, and she was not a person of color. And so that was highly looked down upon. So on March 1st, 2 magistrates conducted a public inquiry. And despite these women's protests of innocence, the pressure became very overwhelming for Tituba, and she eventually just confessed. She then spent the next 3 days detailing her supposed pact with the devil that she made, claiming that she had signed the devil's book and that she had saw Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne's names alongside 7 other women, but she wasn't able to read them. But she could tell there were 7 other women. I'm like, how do you know they're women? You couldn't see them. So this marked the beginning of the Salem witch hysteria.
God.
Now, before moving forward, I want you to understand what life was like in Samuel Parris's home. He was a fire and brimstone, like I said earlier, preacher. And the parsonage, like all houses during this time, was very small. And Paris spent his whole time walking around this house or working in his study, crafting sermons that focused on blaming the devil for all evils, warning against witchcraft, and instilling fear amongst his congregation. So this was the atmosphere he had in his home that his kids were constantly subjected to. So I can imagine this is going to cause some anxiety amongst the children and the slaves as they are, subjected to this.
Walking on eggshells type environment.
And constantly being told, the devil's out to get you, or this is why this evil stuff is happening in our town, or this is why we have all these struggles, is because of the devil, or because people aren't giving their life to Christ or not coming to church. Like it's our fault. We're not living for God enough. And this is why we're struggling in this town. This is why evil's befalling us, or sickness, or whatever it may be. Like,
yep, that's logical.
Yep. So, by late February of 1692, more girls began exhibiting strange fits, including 13-year-old Anne Putnam, daughter of Thomas Putnam, a staunch supporter of Paris, mind you. And Putnam was a man with kind of a chip on his shoulder. He had only received a very small inheritance from his father, which seemed to fuel his resentment. He was also among those who blamed Satan for the town's misfortunes. And so other girls displaying symptoms around this time included Anne Putnam, her mother, their cousin, Mary Walcott, and the Putnam servant, Mercy Lewis. So now we've got another 4 girls that are showing these symptoms.
Why is it only women?
I know. It's very weird. So as more girls began to show these symptoms, the profile of the accused actually shifted. Initially, the target was marginalized members of the community. All 3 of the women that were accused the first time around was Tituba, a slave, Sarah Good, who was a beggar, and Sarah Osborne, who was a bedridden, scarleted lady.
Yeah.
But now the accusations were starting to include the respected, upstanding citizens who would never have been suspected of witchcraft. A notable example was Rebecca Nurse, a 71-year-old Putnam matriarch who was deeply loved and revered in the community. Her accusations was particularly shocking given her reputation. Thomas Putnam brought the accusation against Nurse, claiming it was related to his daughter's afflictions. However, it was later revealed that the Nurse and the Putnam families had a very long history of family disputes over property boundaries.
Okay, so someone's just being petty.
Someone's just being petty and very vindictive in a time when, you do realize what they're being accused of, This is not something new in the sense of witch accusations and going to trial. This had happened on and off throughout, even in Salem's early, establishment. But then also this had been happening in England for decades, or hundreds or 100 years, a couple hundred years. And their witch killings were pretty brutal, even more brutal than the Salem witch trials. So you realize just because of a property line, you're accusing somebody of witchcraft, which is something that could literally end their life. So in a roundabout way, you're committing murder.
Yes,
in my opinion.
Very intentional. They understand the consequences as they pose the accusation. And you said this person was 71?
71. And she'd been
in the 1690?
Uh-huh.
That's a long time to live.
Right?
For that time period, which doesn't help the witch case for her.
It doesn't help the witch case for her. They're like, how do you live so long? She's like, my herbs, witch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I put rosemary in my soup. Burn her.
Burn her at the stake. So as the hysteria spread, more townspeople began to exhibit strange symptoms similar to those of the other girls, leading to a flood of witchcraft accusations. Families and neighbors began exploiting the chaos to settle personal grievances, accusing those whom they had conflicts with, whether this was own family members or neighbors. And they were able to go back in history and make the family trees and the property stuff and actually connect that these people had been in conflict for a while. So you can't help but see that as that played a role in your accusation. So now, while many townspeople were skeptical of the hysteria, fear of being accused, it kept them silent. They ain't gonna say one fucking thing, because if they say something I think it's all fake, you're a witch, they're gonna get accused.
So you agree with them. So you take the side of the witch. Yeah.
One notable figure who opposed the hysteria was John Proctor. John lived in Salem Farms, just south of Salem Village. His wife was Elizabeth, and his 16 children also lived there, and they managed a successful farm. John had been married 2 times before this, but his first wife died young from an illness, and then the other died in childbirth. The Proctor family attended church where Samuel Parris preached and were seen as good, a good Christian family. His marriage to Elizabeth was reported to be very strong. And while they were well regarded in the community, they did not hold like a particular high social standing or like high title. They just were like the average family, but like had a decent flow of money and they were doing good, in hard times. Now, Proctor was a staunch skeptic of the whole witchcraft accusations. And when his servant, Mary Warren, began having fits, he tried to, quote, cure her.
How?
By beating her severely. Yeah, it's not good. And mind you, she's like super young. Like, I think she was late teens, early teens, somewhere around there. So she was a teen during this time. He believed that he could beat the devil out of her. So
that's what they mean by that.
Yeah. He really did believe like the devil's convincing you to make this stuff up. So I'm going to beat you and beat the devil out of you.
Man.
Yeah. This harsh treatment seemed to work temporarily. Mary recanted her accusations of witchcraft, apologized for her fits, and even posted a note at the meeting house suggesting that the other girls were lying. Now, this move, it infuriated the other girls because she's undermining their stories and they turn on her.
Oh, no.
So now that they've turned on her.
Sorry, women can be.
Oh, they can be some vindictive little bitches. Okay.
Snakes.
Yeah. So Mary, she starts feeling like her life is now threatened by all of this backlash. So in fear of her own life, she then accuses John and Elizabeth Proctor of witchcraft, the mother and father of this household. Oh my God. Yeah.
The tables have tabled.
The table has, yes, it has. On April 11th, 1692, both John and Elizabeth Proctor were charged and arrested for witchcraft. Now, I'm including this detail here because it's relevant, but doesn't quite fit anywhere else. There has been speculation about the nature of the relationship between John Proctor and his servant, Mary Warren. Some documents surfaced after all of this, and it suggests that their relationship may have been inappropriate. And I say that like with a big question mark. So
sure,
it just depends on how you look at this. And it was a different time. So like, I don't know what this meant, but I can't help but see this as inappropriate. Mary Warren reportedly testified that she would, quote, pull Proctor's spirit into her lap.
What? Pull his spirit?
Yeah.
Is that his penis?
Exactly. I'm like, this
his penis is spirit?
How else are you going to read that?
They store the soul in the balls.
Yeah. But like, if it's not sexual.
The pee and the soul.
If it's not sexual, how else are you going to like, interpret that?
Does he ejaculate into your lap?
I don't know. And then in Proctor's own diaries or journal entries, he referred to Mary as his jade.
As his jade?
Jade, like the
jewel.
Jewel, yeah.
Sure. Okay.
That one, not so weird. But the whole pulling his spirit into her lap, that's a little awkward. And I really don't know how to take that. And I said she was in her teens. She might have been like 12 or 13.
Oh, that's...
Like she was very young. And he was like in his 50s. So it's very disturbing no matter what.
That's so inappropriate.
So if these accounts are accurate, they might provide some kind of context for why Mary turned against John and Elizabeth when her life was at risk. It's possible that her accusations were a form of retaliation for any mistreatment or abuse she may have suffered as a servant at that time. So could be, could not. It's all speculation. Moving forward on to May 27th, 1692. This was the first official hearing in the Salem witch trials. Prior to this, only informal hearings had been held with no formal verdicts reached. So under pressure from the governor, the magistrates finally convened a formal court session. Unfortunately, the accused were required to represent and defend themselves without legal counsel. I'm like, what? You're being accused of witchcraft and you have to go up here and you have to do this by yourself. No legal counsel allowed. Additionally, the court allowed the admission of spectral evidence. Do you know what that is?
No.
So it is testimony in which the victims claimed to be attacked by the specters or spirits of the accused, even if no one else could see them. So like, for example, if a victim was claiming that the specters of Tituba, so like her spirits, were poking them with needles right then and there in the courtroom, these statements would be accepted as factual evidence.
What?
Despite the fact that no one else in the courtroom can see these supposed spectrals or spirits poking them with needles.
How is that admissible?
Yeah, agreed.
At all.
Agreed.
That honestly, a lot of things they considered evidence wouldn't hold up in court today.
No.
So,
but it's like you're walking into a death chamber. You're not allowed to have any legal counsel and spectral evidence is allowed. How the heck do you mount a defense?
It's a losing game.
Yeah.
Nobody's gonna win.
No, not at all. Now, in the courtroom, the girls who made accusations would writhe, they would whimper and babble whenever the accused took the stand. This drew the attention and turned the trial into a complete public spectacle. So people are showing up and filling the courtrooms just to be able to get a look at these girls and be able to say, oh, I saw such and such, be...
Remember, they had no
possessed.
entertainment.
None.
They were just spilling the tea.
None. It's kind of like you can't turn away from a train wreck kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, this is a front row seat to a train wreck and I want to be in it. I can't help but think that I would want to be as far away because I would want to be the last person on anybody's mind to accuse. I don't want to be in the middle of any of this.
That, and if you consider yourself a spiritual person, especially a Christian in that time, you wouldn't want to like put your soul in jeopardy by being around something like that, I guess.
That demons can go right into you.
Because you're being preached to by people that are like Paris that hold those same really strong toxic beliefs. So,
yeah. Also, I think it's important to remember that during this time, women had little to no power. With these young girls suddenly being in the spotlight, they could have found themselves relishing in it. And many believe that this might have fed into the attention without them fully grasping the consequences of their actions and them living it up in the courtroom. They're young and it's the 80s of the 1600s.
No, it's the 90s.
Oh, we're in the 90s. It is the 90s.
Come on, it's the 90s. They're young.
Now, after the hearing in late May, every accused person was found guilty and faced a death sentence by hanging. This led to 100% conviction rate for their witch accusations. On June 10th, Bridget Bishop was executed, being the first person to die in the Salem witch trials. Researchers have created a map that tracks like the daily numbers of the accused and their residences. And you can find screenshots of this over on our Instagram so you can track it. It is so interesting to see this map change day by day. And you can actually see the bubbles of the red just kind of like spread out and pop up in other, I'm going to say jurisdictions, but like areas across Salem and the surrounding areas as time went on. And it was literally like ticking day by day. Each day it would just get bigger. And so it was, when we say mass hysteria, it was mass hysteria. But following Bridget Bishop's execution, there was a 3-week pause in the increases of accusations. It kind of just like plateaued. And that's because the governor wanted a second opinion on the use of spectral evidence in the cases. So William Stoughton, was a strong supporter of spectral evidence, but the governor sought advice from local ministers. Now, initially, the local ministers were skeptical of spectral evidence, but they also were like pretty committed to eradicating witchcraft. So after some time, they were like, all right, we give you our approval on it. You can use spectral evidence in the trial.
They said, holier than thou, whatever is going to help us get to heaven the quickest.
And then the trials resumed. And right after the ministers were like, yes, use spectral evidence, you can see the maps start growing again.
Oh my God.
I know that.
The church controls everything.
Mhm.
You cannot convince me otherwise.
Yeah.
Y'all brought this shit over here and it controls everything.
But remember, they're trying to separate church and state.
Oh, yeah. They're doing a great job at that. I see it clearly for what it is.
I see it clearly now.
The guys are stupid. I was trying to think of something clever to put.
I always try that, and then I'm like, and that one failed. Sorry. Okay, so if an accused person confessed to witchcraft, though, they were spared from going to trial, but they were expected to implicate 2 or 3 other witches, so-called witches. So this was seen as a way to like validate their confession. So like you can confess, you can not have to go to trial. God will deal with you. You will face God's punishment and God's wrath here on earth and in the afterlife. But we need to understand and validate your confession. So give us 2 or 3 more names.
What?
How many people do you think in the end would just confess to save their lives?
All of them?
Right? I would.
So you just get an endless stream of names because they're trying to save their own ass?
I would be squeaking like a canary.
Did canaries squeak? But also...
In my head, they do. Yeah.
It's madness.
I'm like, how do you not see this just going completely sideways? I don't get it. Now, while I said this earlier, like while there were witch hunts and trials as far back as the 1300s in England, so like hundreds of years prior to this, hundreds of women had been executed, and in a means of very different ways than the women and children and men who were executed here in the Salem witch trials. But the Salem witch trials are the most cited witch hysteria even today. And in my opinion, this is just my opinion, I partially think that this is due to the rapid spread of accusations and the inevitable hysteria that it's going to cause as the accusations just keep piling on, because that's how they're letting them stay out of jail. On July 19th, 1692, 5 more people, including Rebecca Nurse and Sarah Good, were hanged. By this time, the jails were overcrowded and blacksmiths were working overtime to produce iron shackles. Now, these shackles were believed to prevent witches from using their powers, and they were quite different from what we might imagine today. I'll post a picture so you can understand it over on our Instagram. But they consisted of 2 round iron bands on the hands and 2 others on the feet. And each set was connected by a bar. And then those bars were then chained and linked together. So the design forced the prisoner to sit with their knees raised and arms extended, unable to like actually fully stand. So if you tried to stand up like this, you'd literally just be like hunched over because your feet
You'd
and
be
legs.
Full shrimp mode.
Yeah. So the conditions in this jail and all the jails were appalling. The cells were cramped. Multiple prisoners were packed into each and every small space. They were, in my opinion, probably very stuffy and damp. And then during the days, sweltering or freezing at night. Elizabeth Proctor, who was imprisoned while pregnant, endured these harsh conditions. Yeah. John Proctor's wife was pregnant this whole time she's in jail. And Sarah Good's 5-year-old daughter, Dorothy, was also confined in prison after Sarah's execution in July. 5-year-old daughter.
Why though?
Why? Probably because they thought she was a witch too. She inherited her mommy's witchy abilities. That's the only thing I can think of.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, can I just add something about iron?
Yeah.
I meant to pause you a little bit earlier.
Go for it.
Iron is actually used in witchcraft. It's actually not a preventative.
We actually use it, motherfucker.
It was thought to be that for a long time, but you may, if you visit a witch's house, you may see like railroad spikes or an iron horseshoe, and it's to repel bad spirits.
Oh.
So, yeah.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
The more you know.
The more you know.
Almost every witch shop that you go in, you can see like they'll have a basket of like railroad spikes or horseshoes or iron pieces.
I have never been into a witch shop, but I tell you what, I want to go in one so damn
They're
bad.
very good.
So damn bad. I've been into like eclectic, shops that have like a bunch of like everything, but it's not like a designated like
You've been to an Earthbound, but you haven't been to a conjure shop before.
I'm saying like I know what you're talking about, but I don't know what you're talking about.
I gotta take you to one.
I know you and my brother would get along. He is all into this stuff too.
Yay.
I love it. So shortly after they were imprisoned, John Proctor's 16-year-old son was subjected to severe torture for refusing to confess. I don't know why this 16-year-old, I don't know how, not why, but I don't know how the 16-year-old refused to confess and held up to this torture.
I'm surprised too, because everyone else is squealing.
So his torture was that he was bound from head to heel and then bent backwards until blood actually flowed from his nose.
Ugh.
It can be kind of hard to understand how he was tied, but there is a picture on our Instagram, if you want to go look at it, it's like a person nowadays. It's a reenactment. So it's not gory or anything, but it just kind of shows you like how he was tied and how they like tightened it and stuff.
That's horrible.
Yeah. In his desperation, John Proctor actually wrote to the church pleading for intervention, and he requested that the trials be moved to Boston and that only concrete evidence rather than spectral evidence be used. But unfortunately, his appeals went completely unanswered. The church were like, sucks to suck. Let's see what happens.
The church is actually, if you can believe it, not a very forgiving or grace-filled environment.
Especially during this time. They were like, someone called you a witch? Burn at the stake, bitch.
The 90s, man.
On August 5th, John Proctor and his wife were found guilty and sentenced to hang. Now, due to Elizabeth's pregnancy, her execution was postponed to allow her time to give birth.
What?
Yeah. They didn't kill her. They allowed her to give birth. So they were like, we're going to postpone your execution. So you can
But wouldn't this... if that 5-year-old inherited mommy's witchcraft, what about the newborn?
Maybe the 5-year-old was old enough to have learned the witchcraft. So maybe they're thinking that the baby... Sense. I have no idea. It all stupid. But
will somehow be born out of...
They can beat the baby straight is probably what they're thinking.
That's weird because that completely undoes the whole atonement theory. And
true.
Oh my God. It's just everything's unraveling and it's so clear. It's like, you're a bunch of fucking idiots.
Yeah.
But okay.
Now, only 2 weeks after he was found guilty, John Proctor, along with 4 other accused individuals, were paraded through Salem on their way to the gallows. As they were led through the town, large crowds gathered to witness their freaking prosecution and execution. Like, get a movie theater, God damn it.
No, read a book.
Seriously.
Learn how to read and read a book. And it's called Don't Be an Asshole.
No, you can read Matthew J. DeStefano's book, Don't Be a Dick.
Yes.
We'll link it in the show notes.
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug for our friend. During the Salem witch trials, hangings were carried out in a manner that was very gruesome and very different than what's depicted in like modern media. They were always in a public setting, on a hill or an open space, allowing for the best views and for the best spectators to get a chance to see this. They would use a tree with a strong branch and then they would tie a noose around it. The accused was then paraded through town on their way to the gallows. This was like a way to warn others, like, don't you be doing witchcraft or this is going to be where you're going to end up. They were then forced to climb the ladder where they would face outwards. So their back would be against the ladder. The executed then placed the noose, or the executioner, not executed, the executioner would then place the noose around the person's neck, along with sometimes like a bag that they would put over their head. And then the person was then literally rolled off the ladder by the executioner. And now these hangings were known as what's called short drop hangings. Since the drop was not a significant like length, the neck wouldn't break, meaning that the victims were left to convulse and slowly die from strangulation and asphyxiation. Yeah.
Why wouldn't you just do it where it's immediate?
Because they didn't realize that there was a difference at this time.
Oh, they didn't know?
They didn't know. So every time somebody's rolled off the ladder and they start hanging, your body is going to fight to stay alive. So as you're slowly dying, what is your body doing? It's convulsing, it's shaking, it's trying to get out of the noose. But all this did for the onlookers was confirm to them that they had just hung a witch, because they saw it as the demons leaving their body.
Yeah.
Because
can you guys just not kill people?
Yeah, seriously. If you were hung from a much higher height and like dropped, it'd break your neck and you're dead instantly. And so it's way more humane. But this one, nope, just these little drops. So on August 5th, John Proctor was the last to be executed. He had to witness the executions of the other 4 accused individuals, observing each one climb the ladder, have the noose placed around their neck, rolled off the ladder, and then hang from the tree as they all slowly died.
Oh my God.
Just before John Proctor's execution, a fellow minister who also had been accused and found guilty of witchcraft was led to the gallows. As he climbed the hangman's ladder, he began to recite the Lord's Prayer. And boy, this caused an uproar among the crowd. Many spectators even began to protest in order to try to stop the execution, because they believed that no true witch could actually recite the Lord's Prayer. So they were trying to get this man's execution to be stopped. But then another minister stepped up and he tried to calm the crowd. And he argued that the prayer was just a trick from the devil, and that, he may look innocent, but he's still guilty of witchcraft. And after a few minutes, the crowd calmed down and the execution proceeded.
I know what verse he probably was harping off of too.
Yeah, what is it?
It talks about how demons also know scripture. They also know God, and they shudder before him. So
I think they probably did say that. I can't
even
remember.
The demons believe and shudder.
Yes.
I think is the exact quote, but yeah.
Now, on September 22nd of 1692, the Salem witch trials reached a grim peak with the execution of 8 more accused individuals. This tragic day added to the growing list of those who had been condemned to death under the weight of the hysteria that had overtaken Salem. The victims included prominent figures such as Martha Corey and Anne Poiter, whose executions, along with others, underscored the deepening crisis within this community. Now, by late October, the fervor that had driven the trials began to wane as public opinion started to shift very dramatically. The increasing number of executions, along with mounting doubts about the legitimacy of the trials, led to widespread criticism. People started to just speak up. And then I think it's just like a cascading effect. Once one person speaks up and is like, I think this is all bullshit, everyone else starts speaking up.
Because you finally have the guts to do it. Now you hear someone else.
Yeah.
It's like,
it's like the Me Too movement. Everyone's like, oh my God, there's people. I'm like, because there's power in numbers. Like, you don't feel so alone when there's other women standing beside you being like, me too. Like, I've been through this too. So in response to the mounting pressure and the escalating criticism, Governor William Phipps intervened, and on October 29th, 1692, he ordered the closure of the Court of Ore and Terminer. So I think those were just the official courts for the witch accusations. Now, the closure of these courts was followed by the gradual release of those still imprisoned. The governor's decision to halt the trials and release the accused was influenced by a combination of factors, including growing skepticism about the evidence used to convict the accused and the realization of the trial's damaging impacts on the community. This shift marked a significant turning point for the Salem witch trials, moving from a period of intense persecution to one of critical reflection and reconsideration. Now, the aftermath of the trial saw a period of reckoning for those involved. Efforts to address the wrongs committed had begun, and the damage to the community and the lives lost remained a somber legacy for a really long time, and even to this day.
Still is.
Yep. The trials and their resolution ultimately prompted a broader reevaluation of justice and legal practices in colonial America, laying the groundwork for future legal reforms and serving as a stark reminder of the dangers of mass hysteria and the importance of actual due process, not whatever the fuck they were doing. Now, realizing their errors and the likelihood that innocent people had been executed, the authorities sought to cover up the scandal, which is believed to be America's first government cover-up.
Round of applause for the corrupt government.
Mm-hmm. So
say more.
So Sir William Fitz, who led the effort to suppress information, actually banned all publications about the Salem witch trials and reportedly ordered the burning of all related records.
The first book burn.
The first book burn.
Book ban.
Book ban. Book
That's
burn.
relevant to this day. By the way, everyone go buy a copy of The Diary of Anne Frank. While you're out here.
Why is that? There's so many that are banned that I'm like, I don't fucking get those.
To Kill a Mockingbird, Fahrenheit 451 is actually my very favorite.
Oh, I love that. To Kill a Mockingbird was one of the most, it was probably the one book I read in all of like junior high and high school that just like moved me. It broke me.
I was not moved by it when I read that.
It broke me like as a human. You know what I mean? It moved me, not in a good way. I'm just saying it broke me.
Yeah, for sure. At a later time in life, I also was like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
But Fahrenheit 451, that one from the start, I was like,
see, I didn't read that one.
Highly recommend. It's very short, very easy read.
I don't know what was wrong with me, but like later in my high school years, I really got into learning about the Holocaust. And so I read like a lot of the different like Holocaust books, like The Boy in the Striped Pajamas and a couple other ones. I still have them, but I was like, so I should have known that I was going to be like true crime and enthusiast because
we should have known.
I should have known. The signs were there. Also, I loved watching CSI. So like,
okay,
we all knew. We all knew. Now, fortunately, though, over time, additional documents and public accounts emerged, shedding light on the events that had been obscured for a really long time. Now, unfortunately, one of the significant historical losses for centuries was the exact location of the hanging site. For a really long time, it was believed that the hangings occurred atop Gallows Hill, hence why they named it Gallows Hill. But researchers revealed that this location was unlikely because it was just way too high up for them to like be carting all the accused up there. That's just not logistically accurate or feasible in a time when like we don't have trailers like automobiles, you know.
Yeah.
It's a cart and horse buggy, you know, kind of thing.
For sure.
Researchers also later discovered a testimony from an accused woman who had been held in a house at the base of the hill and claimed to have witnessed several hangings. Now, when they went back to topical like graphs and maps and stuff of the houses that existed back then, they were able to see, like, there's no way she would have been up to, like, she wouldn't have been able to see up to Gallows Hill from where she would have been. And so because of that information, along with 3D mapping technology, they actually identified a more plausible location for the hangings. They also interviewed a local resident. When they like found the place, they went to it and found a few residents that had been there for generations. And this resident had actually said that his family and 4 generations had said, look at this piece of land. It's going to be significant one day. Like, his family had talked about, like, that was where the hangings had happened all those years ago. And because of that family, it was passed down and passed down and passed down.
Amazing.
Can it be, guaranteed? No, but this is our best educated guess for today. Now, ground penetrating radar was used to investigate this area, and it revealed a suspected mass grave. However, due to the shallow nature of the grave, no remains were found after 3 centuries. They were like, there's no point in even digging it up. There's not going to be any remains down there. They wouldn't have survived that long. And yes, you heard that right. After the accused were executed, they were literally dumped in a mass grave because they were considered unclean and undeserving of a Christian burial. So
that sucks.
Legend has it, though, that in the dark of night, family members of the deceased would actually return to the mass grave sites, and they would secretly exhume their loved ones and then rebury them on their own property in an unmarked grave in a way to try to like restore some of their dignity to their loved ones.
That's good.
So
it probably was like, in their eyes, it could have been like a reconciliation with God too, and their soul to maybe push them into the gates.
Mm-hmm. And most people, from what I have been able to like understand, most people of the accused, their families didn't, they knew they weren't witches. They were like, you're wrong. Like, we're by you. But a lot of these bodies would go undetected, and they still to this day have never been found. John Proctor is believed to have been somebody who his family had came and taken his body, and through generations, they did point out an area where they thought that he would have been buried. But back in, I think, like the early 2000s, a school was built. And because of the use of heavy machinery, like researchers and archaeologists and stuff like that said there's no way to be able to like dig up and find his body. It's probably either it got damaged, half of it's dug up, or it's all dug up and like moved around. So
what can you do?
Yeah. Now, Samuel Saul, one of the figures who played a very significant role in condemning many of the accused, he later expressed remorse for his actions during the trials, and he, along with Ann Putnam, issued apologies for their involvement. But on the other hand, William Stoughton, one of the key, judges in the trials, he never acknowledged any fault. And when he was questioned about his role, he consistently maintained that he was merely carrying out God's will.
Of course. Yeah.
So he, to his dying day, never admitted any wrong in any of the trials at all.
If your God is real, I'm excited for the time you got to meet him.
Right? Oh, to be
I'm excited for that.
To be a fly on the wall. Mm-hmm. Elizabeth Proctor, she survived the trials, and she went on to name her new son John Proctor Jr.
Oh.
She spent years working to clear her name and seeking restitution, because families were paid restitution after this. No matter what they were paid, it was not enough.
Of course not.
Mm-mm. So today, it's estimated that over 1 million Americans are descendants of those that were executed during the Salem witch trials. On July 19th, 2017, a small hill in Salem, Massachusetts was officially memorialized as the site of the Salem witch trial hangings. Now, did these young girls truly exhibit symptoms of a mysterious illness, or were they genuinely possessed? That's the question that still people have to this day. Like, I can't help, like, there's no way that some girl in her right mind just ran into a fire. That's the one that got me, that was like, something's wrong. You didn't just like try to do this for attention.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of different theories. And there's two that I'm going to bring up that I think are the ones that hold like the most probability. So this is from the Britannica. I'm going to just read straight from the Britannica. It says, some scholars have speculated that the strange behavior may have resulted from some combination of asthma, encephalitis, Lyme disease, epilepsy, child abuse, delusional psychosis, or convulsion ergotism. Now, this last one, the convulsive ergotism, whatever the hell that is, okay? It is a disease caused by eating bread or cereal that's made from rye that has been infected with the fungus ergot. Now, it is an illicit vomiting, choking, fits, hallucinations, and the sense of something crawling on one's skin, okay? Now, it's a hallucinogenic. There you go, that. LSD. So it's literally like an LSD derivative. Could they have just been like poisoned by ergot fungus? That would answer a lot of questions. That would make the dots connect. Now, there's also from the Cleveland Clinic, it says conversion disorder is a condition where a mental health issue disrupts how your brain works. This causes real physical symptoms that a person can't control. Symptoms can include seizures, weakness or paralysis, or reduced input from one or more senses like sight or sound, etc. Now, they are suspecting that conversion disorder is something that like is brought on from like very intense trauma. And we know that these kids were like beaten the shit out of.
Yeah, they were beaten, they were talked down to, they were taught really horrible things about a gospel.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of the victims were young females.
Mm-hmm.
Also, like you said earlier, there's not any males. There's males being accused, but there wasn't like males that I could find in the research that came forward to have these same fits. Now, because of the patriarchy, women were treated worse than men, and women didn't have a lot of power. So were the fathers just beating the shit out of their daughters and causing a lot of trauma, which was resulting in conversion disorder?
Not only that, trigger warning, sexual assault.
Yeah.
But like, fathers would also rape their daughters.
Still happens to this day, unfortunately.
Still happens now. And it was really common then too.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Trauma.
Because you were property of your father until you were traded over as property to your husband.
Yep.
So.
Mm-hmm. Now, to end out this episode, I am going to read off the names and ages and how they passed, the victims of the Salem witch trials. Now, there are, if you look up in research, the number of people who died, it can be different depending on the publication. Sometimes it's 20, sometimes it's 25, sometimes it's 26. I am going to list out 28 people. And there are additional people that could be suspected to have died. But on top of that, but we don't know names. So here we go. Bridget Bishop, age 60, executed by hanging. Sarah Good, age 39, executed by hanging. Rebecca Nurse, age 71, executed by hanging. Elizabeth Howell, age 57, executed by hanging. Suzanne Martin, age 71, executed by hanging. Sarah Wilds, age 65, executed by hanging. Reverend George Burroughs, age 42, executed by hanging. George Jacobs Sr., age 83, executed by hanging. Martha Carrier, age 49, executed by hanging. John Proctor, age 59, executed by hanging. John Willard, age 35, executed by hanging. Martha Corey, age 72, executed by hanging. Mary Esty, age 58, executed by hanging. Mary Parker, age 55, executed by hanging. Alice Parker, age unknown, executed by hanging. Ann Poiter, age 70, executed by hanging. Wilmot Red, age unknown, executed by hanging. Margaret Scott, age 77, executed by hanging. Samuel Wardwell Sr., age 49, executed by hanging. Giles Corey, age 81, pressed to death after he refused to enter a plea. Anne Foster, along with her daughter Mary Foster Laci Jr. and granddaughter Mary Laci Jr., she was arrested on charges of witchcraft in July of 1692. She was tortured and confessed after her own daughter provided evidence against her. In a bid to save her daughter and granddaughter, Anne took the blame on herself. She and her daughter were found guilty on September 22nd, 1692, and sentenced to hang. She was not immediately executed and instead died in prison on December 3rd, 1692. Sarah Osborne, age 49, executed by hanging. Lydia Dustin died March 10th, 1693, after 11 months imprisonment, having been acquitted but unable to pay up for her court fees. She is the mother of Sarah Dustin and Mary Coulson, who were both arrested. A granddaughter, Elizabeth Coulson, who was also issued a warrant but fled to prevent her arrest. Roger Toothacker, a doctor who died in Boston jail on June 16, 1692, after being charged with witchcraft. He was known to form a homeopathic folk medicine and interestingly also claimed to be specialized in detecting and punishing witches. He referred to himself as a witch hunter and bragged to locals that he had taught his daughter, who then killed a witch. His wife, Mary Allen Toothacker, and two daughters, Margaret Toothacker and Martha Toothacker Emerson, would also be arrested. Age and death are unknown. Mercy Good died before her mother, Sarah Good, was executed. Mercy was born in prison after her mother's arrest, but died shortly after. She was an infant, and the cause of her death is unknown. Rebecca Addington Chamberlain. While no court records exist regarding her arrest warrant, it is the general consensus of historians that she was arrested on suspicion of witchcraft. She died at the age of 67 while still in prison. John Durant, While no court records exist regarding his arrest, John was known to live in Balerkia during the trial period and had multiple family members who were also arrested of witchcraft. His wife's stepdaughter's husband, Samuel Wardwell Sr., was hanged on September 22nd of 1692 for witchcraft. Being these connections, it is the general consensus that he was also imprisoned on the charge. He died in Cambridge prison. Infant Scargan. Little information exists as to why his or her mother, Elizabeth Scargan, was imprisoned on charges of witchcraft, but she did spend a 6-month period in jail. During this time, she gave birth to an infant who soon died prior to her release. The child was an infant at death, and the cause of death is unknown. As many as up to 13 additional people are considered to also likely have died in prison while they're on charges of witchcraft. Now, I know that was long, but
thank you for saying all the names.
I think it's the least we can do because we like to talk about the hysteria and it's interesting to talk about, but we don't know a lot about these people because a lot of the records have been lost to history and to the burnings, and we've had to piece this together over, centuries. And I think that's the littlest we can do, like the least we can do to give them back who they were, at least give them their names and ages.
For sure. Because their whole life was, in the end, reduced down to an accusation that didn't even hold up.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah.
So,
and if you want, you can go over to our
peace.
Yes. Rest in peace. There are a handful of different memorials that have been made for the victims of the Salem witch trials. So I highly recommend if you live in the area and you can go see one, please go see it. Take pictures, post it to Instagram on your story, tag us. We'd love to see them. I want to go visit it one day, but there's a couple that we have posted on our Instagram if you want to go take a look at it. The one that marks the actual hanging site is the newest one that was built in 2017. And it kind of looks like a semicircle. It's kind of like just a little open area, and it's pretty cool. So go take a look. But yeah, that's the Salem witch trials. It was, a lot of that was new to me.
It was stupid.
It was very stupid, but it was very new to me when I researched it. I didn't realize all the nitty gritty details of it all.
I don't think a lot of people know it.
I don't think so either.
That deeply. So
I knew that it was hysteria. That's about all I knew because I remember, I can't remember. It was like a theater class or a speech class or something in high school. And the teacher used it as like an example. And then we did this like activity where it was like, be in a group. You have to build a group of like 4 people, but there's one person in the class that is like the disease, and you don't want the disease in your group. So you're trying to figure out who it is and like keep them from.
Yeah.
So we did it. And then at the end, we found out that nobody actually had the disease.
Nobody had it. Yeah.
It to like, she was, use it as a teaching tool for the hysteria.
That's good.
Which was really
That's
cool.
Good.
It was one of the only things in high school that really like stuck out to me. So she was pretty cool. But yeah, you want to take a hard right turn into our palate cleansers?
For sure. Let's talk about it.
Do you have one?
I do have one. Yeah.
Oh, go for it.
So the Sahara Desert is turning green.
What? Wait.
Yeah.
Why? How?
So bountiful rains are greening parts of the Sahara Desert that haven't had a good soak in years. An extratropical cyclone pushed across the northwestern Sahara on September 7th and 8th of this year and drenched large treeless swaths in the area. So now we've got greenery popping up.
I can't be like, I feel torn because I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. But then also I'm like, is this part of global warming? Because like that kind of scares me.
Well, it's good news.
Yeah.
It's good news for that ecosystem. I mean, it's not completely doing away with that, terrain.
Right.
Because
right.
that would be detrimental.
Yeah.
To
and they need water. Just because it's a desert doesn't mean it doesn't need water.
For sure. Yeah. So really it's just gonna bolster whatever's there for the moment. Now, if it was a rain for like a heavy rain for weeks on end, it might be like, oh,
this is concerning. The Sahara Desert's flooding.
What's happening?
What is going on? Oh,
yeah.
That's cool.
But anyway, that's just a cool little thing. There's pictures of it. You can see like pictures from last year versus this year, and you can see little green things popping up everywhere. So it's really cool.
That's exciting. I love
that. On the
Good
News Network.
Okay, so I did not mean to do this. Okay.
But
I was like, this is just perfect. So right after I finished my research for this case, Friday the 13th popped up. And on Facebook, if you follow me on Facebook, you've probably seen it. Or I don't know if I posted on Instagram yet. But on something popped up for like Friday the 13th tattoo. And my husband didn't have work that day. So we had a wild hair up our butt and we went and got Friday the 13th tattoos. And it was so fun. And it's hilarious because I got a tarot card and I got the planchette. Is like the little triangle that you use on the Ouija board. And my planchette has the number 13 in it. So I got all kind of like witchy stuff.
You did.
The 13th. And I just like...
You would have been hung.
I know. And so in a way to like avoid confrontation about my witchy tattoo, I just took a picture of it and put it on Instagram so that anybody and everybody who would disagree with it in my life would see it and be able to work through their feelings prior to seeing me in real life.
You're going to gentle parent over the internet?
And I did. Because I'm like, you know what? I don't want to have that confrontation. I don't mind having that confrontation. But when there's like children involved in the situation on whatever side, I just rather not have that confrontation in front of kids. And so I'm like, it's my life and it's your life. We can agree to disagree and move on. And so I just want you to see that this is my tattoo, work through your emotions, and then we can go back together.
And then we can move on.
It was fun. My husband ended up getting a stick shift that has like the 8 ball, and it looks like it's coming out of his skin. Not the 8 ball, 13 ball, like pool ball.
It looks like it's coming out of his balls.
No, it doesn't. What are you talking about? No, it doesn't.
We were talking about balls earlier with the spirits in the balls, and I can't.
Yeah, no.
It's in my brain now. I'm sorry.
I was very confused because I was like, Tyler's really going to think you think that's coming out of his balls. No,
Tyler, I don't think that. I've seen the picture.
But then there's a zombie hand. There's a zombie hand that's holding the gear shifter. Mm-hmm. And so,
putting it into gear. 13.
And there's a Friday the 13th in December, and I am wanting and already planned my next Friday the 13th tattoo.
Great. Excited for it.
Anyways, but that is,
I guess that's all for us.
Salem Witch Trials. We have another episode coming up for you about, spooky shit for Halloween. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this.
Yeah, the final Halloween episode is coming out. So
I really like doing our Halloween.
Not this one, but the next one. And then we're done with spooky season.
Which I'm
so
sad.
It's fine. We're still going to relish in it while we have it. So,
which it's fun because we get to do this. So we get to dive deep into spooky season, but then we're done recording even before spooky season hits. And then October hits and we get to relive it again. So we're ahead of you guys.
Don't break the fourth wall, Laci. It's fine. Well, with that, please stay safe, stay skeptical,
and steer clear of the cultish carousel. We interrupt this episode with a message from our sponsor. If you've ever deconstructed your faith, you know it's not easy. But just imagine if you could have people to guide you through the process.
That's right. People like Jim Palmer, Kristen Dumez, author of Jesus and John Wayne, Jennifer Knapp, Brad Jerzak, Brian Zond, Paul Young, author of The Shack, and more. Well, if you head over to choiracademy.com and register for Square 2 using the promo code LOLA, you'll get 10% off the regular registration cost of this awesome course and community just for being a fan of our show.
All links can be found in the show notes. Again, that's code LOLA, LOLA, for 10% off the Square 2 course.
Also, heathens, if you're enjoying the show so far, please remember to subscribe wherever you're listening to us. And you can also join our Patreon community and have access to the Potty Podcast, where we shoot the shit. We talk about whatever the heck we want to. Also, follow us on Instagram and TikTok because we have cute videos. Deadly Faith is brought to you by Choircast Network. It's produced by Laci Bean and Lola Robbins and audio engineered by Eric Howell. Thanks for listening.